Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on the impact of the new EU organic regulation on smallholders value chain. I'm Julia Lanou from Organics International, and I would like to give a couple of minutes for everybody to get here. Numbers are rising. We are over 250 people together. So I want to give some minutes more for people to settle in because we have over 1,000 people registered. So we assume a lot of people are coming. It's a crucial issue. We need a lot of information and clarification because there's more questions than answers. But here we have experts that will bring us many answers, I hope. And as well, some of you might be moved to a live stream in YouTube because the room allowed us only up to a certain number of people, but that will be automatically done. We have a chat box where you can place your questions throughout the whole presentations, and at the end of the session, we also will have a Q&A group. So I will wait a little bit more before we fully open the session and settle in. So welcome to the ones that are joining. Hello to the ones that joined us in the last minute, over 100 more we have. So yeah, people keep on coming in. I'm Julia Lanou. I'm from Organics International. I want to welcome you. We are waiting a little bit so people fully join before we kick off. Okay, so let's not waste any more precious time because we have 2 hours, but we have a very important topic to work on. So we will need all the hours again. So welcome everybody to this webinar on the impact of the new EU organic regulation on small value chain. And I would like to present all the speakers and also the session for today. So first of all, I'm Julia Lanou. I'm part of the World Board of Organics International, the umbrella organization for the organic movement. And we have 3 speakers today that will share their case studies and all the knowledge and learnings from the last years of researching on the impact and the consequences these changes will have for smallholder farmers, especially internal control systems. So welcome everybody. And as I said, this webinar is organized by Organics International jointly with FiBL, that is the Research Institute for Organic Agriculture based in Switzerland, that is one of the most important research institutes in the world, basically in organic. And we have the great pleasure to have together here as well Andreas and Federica from Fairtrade International and from Naturland that will bring from the ground experience on also how this is impacting all of us. Why we organize this webinar? Well, because the impact these changes will have on all these smallholders, all the markets, is crucial. And there's still many questions, and the adaptation period is coming into an end at the end of October, or in October this year. And that will mean that for many smallholder farmers that didn't get to adapt and make the transition won't have any more access to the market. And that will also impact on consumers and the market as a whole. So we want to present a little bit all the, Florentine, maybe we go to the next one. Yeah, so here we have our speakers. So I would like to present first Florentine. She's the master head behind all of this. She has been working for over a decade, I think, in all these topics. She is a small mistake, sorry for that. She's from FiBL, the Research Institute for Organic Agriculture. She's a senior expert on smallholder group certification, and she has focused on the new EU regulation and the impact on third countries. And she has over 25 years of experience in organic certification, fair trade, and standard settings. She has worked closely with IFOAM for many years now and worked together with us on trainings and capacity development. She has prepared several webinars, and especially on this topic as well. They are coming now from BioFach as well, trying to bring clarity to this topic, but still we need more and more. And she has, as a good scientist that she is, she really went into the core and to the bone and trying to understand truly the impacts, and she will share a bit of all that information with us and the outcomes. Then we have Andreas Kratz. He's the Director of Global Products Program and Policy and the Director of Standards and Pricing at Fairtrade International. His work focused on developing fair trade products and thematic strategies and fair trade standards supporting those strategies. The mandate of Andreas also includes the development of innovative business models, partnership for collaboration, and policy supporting fair trade, global advocacy work. Andrea is by no way an outsider of the organic movement. Before joining fair trade, he worked for 15 years in an organic certification sector and 5 years in the organic wholesale business. So more organic you can't be. And we can see the link between fair trade and organic, that we are all one. And finally, but not least, we have Federica Varini. She's from Naturland, and also very close from IFOAM because she worked several years here with us as well. She's an organic quality assurance and group certification specialist. And she worked, as I said, at IFOAM for the organic guarantee and policy system as a coordinator, where she conducted extensive research on policy supporting the global development of the organic sector. Currently, she coordinates the implementation of Naturland projects in the Philippines with a particular focus on certification and local market development. So as you see, we have quite a panel. And I would like to, before I give the floor to Florentine, a little bit why for IFOAM is so important this. Because, and also we go a little bit through the agenda of today. But for IFOAM, smallholders are at our core and our heart, and it's what pushes. So, and we still live in a world where the market is concentrated in the global north, but the production is concentrated in the global south. And in most cases, especially in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, this control system, farmers groups are a key player. So for IFOAM, we had always been our focus on working and supporting them and try to see how to maintain and enhance their market access. With these new changes in the regulation, even though that we had worked together with the commissions, etc., still there are very challenging for smallholders because realities are not the same everywhere, that we will learn today. We had been working in the last years doing trainings, and now we have one in Tanzania as well, but this will take time and is something that is not for one to forget, but it's a constant work. So for today, with this, I think I close my introduction for the welcoming. It was long enough. And the first, we will have the biggest presentation, that is Florentine. The Q&A will be open, so please bring your questions. I will be going through them. I forgot to tell you, I'm very sorry, technical and housekeeping things. This session is recorded. For sure, when you joined, you already agreed on recording. This session recording and all the presentations will become available and be shared with all of you, and as well throughout our social medias and different communication channels. And throughout the whole webinar, if you are on Zoom or at the live stream on YouTube, you can place your questions there and we will go through them and bring them up. We won't be open microphones because we are quite some. We are already 430 people. So to keep it clean, we will use the Q&A box. So please don't be shy, ask your questions, and I will bring them to the speakers. So first we will have, as I said, Florentine she will be sharing FiBL's results on some case studies they did, how this will impact. Then we will have Andreas with their case studies for organic and fair trade certified products. And then we will have Federica presenting some analysis also by regions, very interesting, on the adaptations and the challenges their farmers are facing. And at the end, we will have a bigger Q&A. So without any delays, the floor is yours, Florentine. Thank you. Sorry, Florentine, your mic is off, so we didn't hear anything. So.
Okay. Thank you, Julia, for the introduction and a warm welcome to you. I just said that I can't see you, Julia, so just so that you're aware, I'm struggling a little bit with running the presentation. Warm welcome to all of you. We're here today. I'm here today to share with you some findings from two bigger impact studies we did on understanding the impacts of the new EU regulation, specifically on smallholder value chains. I'll give you a brief introduction on the new regulation and supply chains, then explain a little bit the specific new requirements for group of operators and what implications that will have. And then we'll dive in a little bit on understanding the implications for different regions of the world and what is the current status of adaptation, which is actually a bit tricky, as well as discussing very briefly expected effects on the EU organic sector and closing with conclusions and recommendations at the end. So we at FiBL, in addition to a lot of trainings and capacity buildings around the new regulation and try to understand it to groups, we have also done two studies to better understand the implications and impacts of the new regulation on smallholder value chains, always with the main objective to highlight the existing gaps in order to support adaptation and alignment of producers. So the global study took place in the last year until last October and included a survey of international survey that IFOAM promoted, case studies, various interviews, but also detailed data analysis, including data from Fairtrade International, traces import data, and organic production data. In the case study in the Dominican Republic, which was done on behalf of co-lead in the AgroInfo program, we dived deeper into one specific country, which was particularly interesting, trying to understand costs better, doing various stakeholder interviews and workshops and engagement with the local authorities to find next steps and ways forward. So all of this, in addition with a lot of training, fed into what I'm presenting to you today. So what is the new EU regulation and how is the system changing? So the EU organic import system has now changed from equivalence to compliance. So it's a complete fundamental change of the import system into the European Union, but there are still two different options for imports. One that we won't focus much about is still that there's 14 countries with EU recognized national organic systems, either by being recognized as equivalent or by trade agreement, can be imported. The country equivalency system is phased out and replaced by trade agreements. And this particular import option is still in transition, with the end of transition only end of 2026. So that's for those 14 countries like the US, but also Tunisia, India, Japan, Australia, Canada, Switzerland, the UK. The system has not changed in 2025, and it's still in transition. So some trade agreements are already complete, others are in preparation, and the Commission is negotiating new trade agreements on organic products. But the focus of our webinar is all other third countries apart from those, which includes most of the typical smallholder production countries with the exception of India. These countries have so far been under the third country equivalency recognition, and all certification in all these countries has changed from equivalence to compliance. The third country control bodies had 3 years to change from equivalence to compliance since 2022. And that ended, the transition period ended the end of last year. And by the end of 2024, 48 control bodies have been recognized for compliance certification, and they are now listed in the annex of this regulation where you can find them all with their recognized activity scope. So how is that transition working out in practice? This is actually very complicated and difficult to understand. So that's why I'm trying to explain it briefly. The control bodies have been approved in batches since mid-2024, but this mid-season approval of control bodies meant that the switch to the full new system was quite late. So most control bodies only switched to compliance certification and inspections around October 2024, and they could only issue certificates under the old regulation until the end of last year. So this means that even today, most operators and producer groups are currently still certified according to the old regulation and equivalent system, even the 2024 certificates. Now, since this year, only the new regulation applies. So the transition period is officially over. All controls this year take place only according to the new regulation. The input rules are only according to the new regulation. And most groups and operators in third countries will be checked for compliance for the first time this year, or they had their control in October, November. And what's in place to prevent the stop of organic imports during that time is a derogation period until the 15th of October, which allows product with an equivalence certificate, so most of the product certified last year, to still be imported into the EU, and the COI, the certificate of inspection, can be issued if the control body is recognized for compliance and the supplier certification is pending. But after October 2025, only suppliers certified in compliance can continue to deliver products. What's important to note, I mean, on all sides, producers and importers, is there is no guarantee that the old certificate will remain valid until the 15th of October, because inspections take place now at all times in 2025. And if there is major or critical non-compliances, the control body will need to sanction or suspend certification with immediate effect. And also, the old certificate may already lose validity earlier than October 2025. So the effects of the change to compliance will be felt already now, or are being felt. And not all certificates are automatically valid until the 15th of October. So let's dive in. What does it mean with organic group certification? Since decades, producers in low and middle income countries have been certified as producer groups with an internal control system. It's a different control system than an individual farm operator certification in Europe. And actually, the EU organic regulation was the first major regulation to include group certification directly in the legal text applicable to production within the EU and in third countries. And when writing the regulation, the intent was very clearly that the rules for specifically imported products and for group certification should be strengthened, because there were serious concerns about the quality of control in third countries and concerns that there was a need for a more level playing field, both with EU operators, but also between different operators and different countries. The need for a level playing field was clearly recognized by the sector. What are the key changes? The biggest change really is this change to compliance, which has various implications and is different to the old approach of equivalence. And the challenge is that most operators, as well as experts, both in Europe and in the producer countries, don't yet understand all the rules, or they're difficult to apply to real case settings and systems in the different countries. There's entirely new rules for group of operators, and compliance mean that you actually have to comply with all legal texts and all details contained in them word by word. So that's quite a change also with regard to production rules, that the European production rules apply literally to every farmer anywhere in the world. Other key changes is that there are new rules for the control of group of operators, which mean more re-inspection of members that are inspected and more sampling of members. There's a strong focus on precautionary measures to prevent any contamination and commingling, and strict measures in case of detection of any unauthorized substances by the operators or the control bodies. What's also new is that there will be a list of high-risk products from third countries that are subject to control twice a year and more intense sampling. Something like that is already in place in form of a system of additional measures by letter, but in future it will be written in a secondary legislation, this list of high-risk country and products. Group certification is something that matters for many imported products. And as part of the study, we tried to analyze and understand a bit bigger which products are actually produced and imported predominantly from producer groups, as opposed to individual large plantations. And as you can see, major commodities like coffee, cocoa, but also spices, rice, quinoa, coconut, cashew, sesame, originate more than 70% from group certification, as do some products in Turkey and Mediterranean, like figs, sultanas, apricots, hazelnuts, for example. And there is other important commodities like banana, mango, soybean, honey, dates, olive oil that can come to a considerate amount still from producer groups. So all the changes we're discussing, not only concerning coffee and cocoa, but really a wide range of producers and products that are used in many other organic products. So what are these new requirements for group of operators? The regulation now defines what a group of operators is, and at first it reads very nicely, but it actually defines a new concept of how a group must be organized in order to be certified as a group for the European market. So a group of operators shall only be composed of members who are organic and in conversion farmers under a maximum farm size or turnover limit. So be either smaller than 5 hectare total agricultural holding or under 25,000 euro organic turnover. So this is a very important rule that has far-reaching implications, the combination of these two rules. There is also a new maximum size for a group, that a group can only have up to 2,000 members, shall have legal personality, operate an internal control system, and has a system of joint marketing. Now, all these sounds at first quite easy to meet. At least that was my impression when I first read the article 4 years ago. But as it turns out, the devil's in the detail. Let me go first highlight just one aspect that we found in all interviews, in all studies, to be particularly confusing. It's the size restriction. So all farms that are smaller than 5 hectare total agricultural holding automatically qualify as member of group of operators. You don't need to check the organic turnover. And luckily, as we also found in the study, almost 70% of groups in the survey indicate that their farmers are under 5 hectare of total land. So the majority of organic smallholders in groups is under the size limit of 5 hectare. But in almost all countries, almost all groups also have members, that single members or a couple of members or even a majority of members that have more than 5 hectare total agricultural holding, which includes also other crops than those exported to Europe. But it's okay for these farmers to still be member if their organic turnover is less than 25,000 euro. And we found in the study that in most crops and regions, the organic turnover of group members, even if they have more than 5 hectares, is much below 25,000 euro. But in some crops or regions, especially Latin America, banana, honey, and fruit, we found that there is a much higher number of farmers that are likely exceeding the limit and hence triggering the need for adaptation measures. And as Andreas will also explain, with recent market prices, there is concerns that also more cocoa and coffee farmers that are actually smallholder members or medium-sized member of smallholder groups risk to be above the limit in a 12-month period because of current price, triggering also the need for adaptation measures. So what is the scale of group certification? How many people now need to adapt to the new rules? This was amazingly difficult actually to estimate because data on group certification is notoriously absent, but based on fair trade data and analysis of country production data and import data, we came to an estimate that we're talking about roughly 1,800 to 2,000 producer groups without India that need to change to compliance with the new rules. We're talking about roughly 1 million of organic farmers that are certified in producer groups. So all of these groups need to adapt to the new production and ICS rule and meet every word of the regulation, basically. In addition, about 70% of groups also need to change their organizational composition and setup of their group in order to continue certification for the European market. And only around 30%, that's a total of 500 groups, can be certified in their current form without any legal or membership adaptation. So that sort of highlights the scale of the change required to meet the new regulation. So which producer groups need to adapt their organizational setup because they don't fully meet the new definition of a group of operator as they are. So that's all producer groups organized by processors or exporters. Around 50% of all producer organizations, all farmers organizations like cooperatives or cooperative unions and other forms of farmer associations, and also producer groups without internal control system with something like that's called a 100% control system, which is common, as we'll see, in Mediterranean third countries like Turkey. And the necessary adaptations are in practice often very complex, challenging, and daunting for the groups because they have unknown economic effects since they need to change their legal structure and setup. So as I mentioned, Fairtrade luckily had very good data on all certified Fairtrade small producer organization and their membership. So there are in total 850 Fairtrade-Organic small producer organizations with around 530,000 organic members. And of those, when we did the analysis, more than 50% are estimated to not meet the definition as they are and requiring adaptation. And often, sometimes it's one reason why they need to change their structure. Sometimes it's multiple reasons. Many farmer organizations in particular face a challenge that they have both organic and non-organic statutory members because they started as a cooperative that then introduced an organic program. So not all of their members are organic. There are some that have more than 2,000 members and they represent a very high number of farmers. There are also some that have members that are estimated to be too big, and this number is effectively probably now higher by now because of market price developments in coffee and cocoa. Some are company managed and some for other reasons. So what adaptations are needed for farmers' organizations with non-organic or too large members, or being too big, being over 2,000 members. Unfortunately, we found that there really is no tested, suitable, universal adaptation option. Each organization needs to consider options carefully. It's not required and often not advisable to split the organization or to expel members, which often tends to be a first reaction. And all cases we have accompanied and seen, it actually was a lot of back and forth and took several months to try to figure out a good solution. One solution is to set up a new entity specifically only for the small eligible farmers of the organization as a group of operators, and the current organization can be certified as operator. In case of second or third grade farmer organizations like unions or federation, the certification of the primary first grade farmers associations is a good solution for adaptation, but in all cases, it depends on the group setup. If farmers are too big to be members, it tends to be particularly complex and challenging for the groups. But in any case, these legal changes, they tend to be quite touchy for producer organizations. For processor and exporter organized groups, they have to form one or several new legal entities that are composed of farmers, a separate group of operators, and the processor exporter will not be certified as a group anymore, but just as an operator for preparation and export. But the new group of operator entity, like the farmers group or farmers association, can subcontract ICS or traceability system services to the exporter. In reality, it means often complex new legal agreements, new commercial risks and uncertainties to mitigate. But for many of the supply chains, adaptation is already well in progress. So I'm sharing a few examples just to highlight how adaptation could work. It's a company exporting cocoa, dried fruit, and soy from West Africa with 7,000 farmers under the certificate. So in this case, the exporter helped to set up 8 cooperatives as group of operators. They're also working with existing cooperatives. The certificates will be owned by the cooperatives, but the trader will pay the cost and charge it to the cooperatives. And the trader will continue to administer the ICS, and there is new commercial agreements between trader and every cooperative, and very close additional supervision of product flow and payments. And the trader maintains direct contact with producers through trainings, extra premium payments, and special projects. The cost increase in this particular case has been around factor 2.5 between the old system and the future system, but adaptation is well in progress. Another example is a coconut mill from Southeast Asia with 1,000 farmers under one certificate for EU and NOP. There again, a new group of operator entity has been set up, but only for a part of farmers, only for 100 farmers for EU. The rest is certified separately as an NOP project. They have set up a guarantee company, which is a local form of non-profit company in which farmers can be members. And there's a very close link between the new unit and the company. Again, this tends to take quite some time to figure out a suitable legal entity according to national law that meets all the requirements for the specific supply chain. And again, the coconut mill will provide the ICS staff to the new entity, but the services will be charged, and in the end the mill buys the product from the new entity. So it's a whole new system how the whole supply chain is organized. Beyond the new group of operator rules, there is also obviously new organic production rules which have been strengthened, but most of all they apply fully in all detail also to producers in third countries. So what we have and out of these stricter rules, like stricter rules for parallel production, retroactive approval of conversion period, new restrictions for plant protection substances, the aspects we've seen recently to most likely be most challenging for producer groups worldwide is the stricter rules on retroactive approval of conversion and new restriction for plant protection substances. But so far, these changes have yet gotten less focus because nobody has yet been fully inspected against the new rules. And yeah, the legal entity has received a lot of focus because groups knew they had to change something in order to even be eligible to apply for certification under the new rules. What we have seen very clearly in all studies is that the changes have an effect on organic certification and also internal compliance costs. In the survey, which was almost a year ago, 12% of respondents expected an increase in costs of less than 10%, whereas 43% expected an increase by more than 50%. By now, since now all groups have received their actual certification budgets for 2025, in general, I'd say that the cost increases are higher than everybody expected back then. In a costing example we did in the Dominican Republic, we found that also the internal costs per farmers are increasing by around 50% with the changes. The external costs per farmer has increased by 56%, and all internal and external costs together by around 50%. If you take it per ton produced, it was the same picture, that the costs increased by around 50%. This was one example, and each case is quite different because the effects really are quite heterogeneous depending on the size of the group, its organization, how many changes are required. But even in simple cases, and this was actually a rather simple case, there is a cost increase that is still noticeable for the groups. And most of all, they are worried who will pay these higher costs and whether it's worth taking the risk to pay the higher costs and whether they'll be covered by the market. So what if we look a bit closer at different regions and try to understand where are producer groups right now? We're already in 2025, everybody should be compliant, but are they? So let's first look at Latin America. We're talking about a bit less than 300,000 organic producers with a very high number of producer groups. Some of them are very small. And around 60% need to adapt to the group of operator definition. Challenges are that many farmers, well-established, naturally grown farmers organizations have also non-organic members. In some crops, too large members are likely because there is good turnover that is being achieved. And adaptation is difficult as it's farmers associations, democratically organized farmers associations. So all farmers need to agree to the changes, and it's particularly touchy for them to reorganize or change their structure and setup. There's also some processor exporter organized groups. Some ICAs will definitely need strengthening and alignment, but some are very strong because their organic production tends to be more intense. The plant protection substance restrictions are expected to be challenging, and many groups lack the financial means to invest in changes because they have already been investing all their buffer money on efforts to meet the deforestation regulation. This is particularly the case in banana and cocoa, in cocoa and coffee. In the Dominican Republic, we found that very clearly, again, that the changes disproportionately impact small producers. In the Dominican Republic, the larger producers, nobody raised any concerns that the new rules would mean major changes for them. The new rules were seen to enhance transparency and harmonize compliance. But banana in particular faced real difficulties due to high production costs and the new turnover limit. So a lot of banana farmers easily exceed the new farm limit, which makes it very difficult for banana associations to adapt. So pretty much all banana associations of the country needed to change their composition or setup. Equally, the cocoa sector struggles with adaptation because all cocoa associations in the country needed to change their legal setup or composition, often because they have organic and non-organic members. Some farms are too big. It became clear that often the rules are misunderstood. And for example, Farmers Association started to exclude all cocoa farmers with more than 5 hectares of land, which of course then raises economic difficulties for the groups, and it wouldn't even have been necessary. But the rules are confusing to apply, and this became very apparent in the interviews even still last autumn. And the costs of compliance are expected to increase, and it's really uncertain to producers how and when the increased costs will be covered by the market. And what we found was that at least last autumn, most groups were still in the process of finding viable solution and adaptation, and it seems unlikely that compliance certification can realistically be ready and finished by October 2025. So it's really a running against the time that's a challenge here. When we look at Africa, it's the highest number of organic producers with more than 1 million organic producers, not all of them selling to the EU, but still. And many large volume supply chains need to adapt their organizational setups. Many groups are very large with much more than 2,000 farmers, and the farms are very, very small. So the costs are immediately critical. If the costs increase, it's not worth to continue buying from very small organic farmers. Many of the farmers associations have also non-organic members, and many groups are organized by companies, especially in horticulture, nuts, oilseeds, but also cacao. An additional challenge in Africa is that a lot of ICAs need to be strengthened considerably, and the stricter rules for retroactive recognition of conversion will be a major challenge, because often farmers, there is a certain change of farmers, that there are new farmers joining the groups, but also that existing organic farmers take on new fallow land as organic. And with the new rules, these new lands or fields of the organic farmers then have to undergo 3 years conversion, and the whole system really changes fundamentally for a lot of organic groups on the continent. What we found is that all EU-owned trader organized groups appear to be well in process of adaptation and ready by the end of last year, but only few of the large farmers associations and some other companies, maybe not owned by Europeans or closely associated to Europe, have started adaptation. And an additional challenge is heavy national administration, low national procedures in registration of legal entities, as well as already struggling with the implementation of the EUDR, the EU deforestation regulation, as additional challenge. Sorry. So for Asia, we have a very special case that India, as I mentioned, is a recognized equivalent organic country for the EU, and crop production in grower groups under the national program are under the Indian national program. So they don't have to change directly to compliance with the new group of operator rules, but all processed products must be already controlled also under the compliance regime now in 2025. So it's a special case, and so the number of producers in India has not been included in our studies numbers. And this is important because in India alone, there are more than 2 million organic producers in more than 6,000 groups. But yeah, the other products are the other countries and products include a lot of coconut products, rice, but also spices, coffee, cotton, cashew, for example. And again, we found that around 70% of certified groups need to adapt to become certified. Many are exporter organized, some have non-organic or too large members. But also it seems that effects vary, like Thailand seems to be already sort of well impressive of adaptation, whereas we've seen less information in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Philippines so far. We'll see how it goes. Mediterranean countries, and especially Turkey, is not a typical smallholder country, but as it turns out, the production of a lot of key products like sultanas, dried figs, apricot, hazelnuts is also in farmer group clusters on behalf of processors and exporters with a system of 100% external control by the control body and without any internal control system. Some groups are also classical ICS-based groups, but this means this is also not allowed anymore under the new regulation. So all groups need to adapt. Some or many are expected to change to individual certification, which has mainly cost implications, but also some of the clusters or groups may change their setup and set up new legal entities composed of farmers to become certified as group of operators. Adaptation seems to be well in progress, but there is still significant changes in the setup and the organization of key supply chains of very high volume organic products to Europe, which probably will be felt at some point. So what are the overall effects? What is the status of adaptation? Actually, so far, even now in March 2025, the overall effects are still very hard to predict. Many groups only realized the real needs for adaptation and future costs late in 2024. So what we found in the study is that last spring, 82% of groups indicated that they plan to adapt to the new rules. Thereof 60% with considerable challenges. From interviews and parallel studies since then, we know that many back then in 2024 didn't have yet a clear implementation plan or even fully understand the need of adaptation. And as far as we know, even right now, or at least say in February, many groups are still looking for adaptation solutions, especially to the legal setup and legal entity rules, but also obviously all new ICS and production rules. Andreas will share the situation for Fairtrade, but for a recent survey by BioSwiss, they found that around 46% are only partially adapted, 9% not at all, and 45% say that they are ready and fully adapted.
Florentine, sorry for interrupting you. You have 5 minutes left.
Yes.
Could it
Okay.
be? Sorry.
Yes, that's good. So I'll go quicker. For last snapshots is a lot of groups seem to be changing their plans since they received the certification budget or they reconsidered their original plan. So it's less stable than we assumed because there was new information for them. So they keep changing plans. So that's a challenge for the implementation. For the European sector, I'll go quickly, but overall traders don't know the effects yet either, but they notice increased costs. Some say adaptation is well in progress. Most say that most suppliers will continue, but that cost of certification will increase. And it was noted that still certifiers' practices seem to vary considerably, and sharing some other findings at BioFac. So what are the overall conclusions? The key opportunities we identified is that the new rules are clearly expected to increase the integrity of organic products for the EU and beyond by setting consistent and harmonized rules and leveling the playing field. producer groups that meet the new requirements, that are strict and clear, may ultimately benefit from an improved market position and less competitive race to the bottom. There should be more transparency on group certification, and operating in smaller group units and with clear rules can help to mitigate risks. Of course, as you probably took from my presentation, there is also challenges. Around 70% need to change their setup, and these required changes may be daunting. And there is many organic supply chains that are likely to drop or lose or reduce their organic certification in this and coming year. But it's due to a combination of effects of the adaptation, but also price pressure, higher costs for being certified, lower demand by the EU, and the stricter new rules. But those who have low sales with Europe are more likely to give up than those with high sales to Europe and a focus on the European market. For the European market, produced product availability and supply chain disruptions seems likely, and increased costs, which will vary. The recommendations are to provide that traders need to join forces to provide information to supplier and consider their challenges in their contracting, and wherever possible share risks and accommodate the higher compliance costs in the value chains. There is a need for additional support and training programs, including, if possible, targeted financial and legal support for producer groups for the initial adaptation, and also recommendations to policymakers to compile the rules in a clear way for third countries, and official training, maybe adjust selected requirements in secondary legislation, and collect more detailed data on group certification. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Florentine. You were, wow, a lot of information in a short time. I know it sounds like a lot of time, but I think we needed more. And there's a lot of questions, and quickly, maybe before we jump to Andreas, there's a lot of questions on turnover against actual profit, and also how to deal with it with multi-cropping or agroforestry systems, you know, also because you mentioned at the beginning you have per product, but most of these smallholders might have multi-croppings. And maybe there are more questions for them later, but now, and maybe that also feeds for the next panel list.
Yeah. So the organic turnover of the farmer, what's important is that you only need to check it if the farmer has more than 5 hectares. So if the farmer has total land under 5 hectares, you don't need to check it. That's the case for a lot of spice farmers, for example, or other farmers. But those farmers that have more than 5 hectares, yes, you need to check the organic turnover. And the organic turnover is the organic sales of the farmer to the group. So only the sales to the group are organic and count for the organic turnover. And of course, say in case of organic spices, if the farmer sells organic pepper and organic nutmeg to the group, you need to add up the turnover, the sales value of the different crops. In reality, most groups are more freaked out by the organic turnover, and when you look at the numbers, you look at the yield estimate times the farm gate price, and you sum this up, even potentially most organic farmers are way lower than 25,000 euro. The only cases we've come across, say in cocoa, in Domrep, we found that farmers with more than 9 hectares of cocoa alone could exceed the 25,000 euro threshold. But the majority, and much more farmers than the group thought, are actually under the 25,000 euro limit. And not even all products are sold to the group as organic. So often the organic turnover, when you look at it, is lower than the groups initially think or expect.
Thank you, Florentine. And actually that brings also a reality check of who are we talking about and what is the economic reality. So also understanding that. Thank you again, and we will come back for more questions. But I would like now to give the floor to Andreas Kratz from Fairtrade International, and he will be sharing his key finding. The floor is yours, Andreas. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. I want to speak on behalf of fair trade producers. Those are roughly, as you have already heard, quite many producer organizations. We're counting with more than 500,000 of families, to which you also need to include quite a number of families of workers. You should also know that the organic regulation also impacts plantations, so families of workers are equally impacted, even if plantations can cope with it a little bit better. Today we're talking about smallholders, so it's my pleasure to speak on behalf of Fairtrade small-scale producer organizations. Next slide, please. To give you a grasp of the size of what we are talking about and how representative this is, we have started a survey from the beginning of the year, and one can continuously update that information in our survey. At the moment, 227 small-scale producer organizations have participated in that survey from out of 727 that have registered Fairtrade sales, organic Fairtrade sales. So that is a response rate of 31%. And when you look at the numbers, it's quite varied in terms of products, with the largest being coffee, then cocoa, tea, fresh fruit, herbs, and banana, but all the products that Fairtrade usually is known for, and that comes from third countries. It's also quite representative when you talk about geographies. So Latin American, Caribbean is roughly 50%, and Africa 20%, and Asia Pacific 27%. As Florentine has already said, that doesn't necessarily represent exactly the distribution of affected people, because Africa has large small producer organizations, and Latin America and Asia tend to have smaller ones. But I think as a conclusion out of that slide, we can say, A, it's representative for the data set of Fairtrade organic producer organizations, but also when you look at the total number of POs that you have heard from Florentine, that the Fairtrade POs are a representative sample for all small producer organizations worldwide, with the exception of, I would say, North Africa and Mediterranean, because the setting is quite different. So having that in mind, that what you see on the next few slides is quite representative, I want to shift to the next. So one of the questions we have in the survey is, are you actually working towards renewing the organic certificate, yes or no? And the result is roughly a 20-80 split. 20% of producer organizations are saying no. Now, we need to understand that the survey basically have only yes/no answers, or one option, so only one option to respond. We don't go into the details of the reasons why people are not working towards renewing the organic certificate. That can be that some people are saying, I've already completed my preparation or even have passed the audit. Others might say, I've decided to stop organic. Others may decide it for different reasons to tick the no button. But I would say, there is quite a lot that is still in progress when it comes to working towards the organic regulation, because the audits are around the corner or have already happened. And if 80% are still in preparation, sorry, that is quite challenging. Now, the second question is your producer organization challenged by the organic regulation? So do you foresee challenges in being fully compliant? And there we have the answer of 30% saying no and 70% saying yes. Now, again, no might mean that we have also plantations there that don't find that challenging to adapt to the new regulation. We might also have quite a large percentage of those that are either stopping organic regulation or that have already completed it. We don't know yet the answer, but I would also conclude that 70% saying I'm challenged by the organic regulation is not a good sign. There is a lot of stake for 727 producer organizations in Fairtrade. Next slide, please. Our next question was, does your producer organization have sufficient information to prepare for the compliance? And information is key to make good decisions. So that's quite a critical question. And only 36% are saying that they are fully informed or are perceiving that they are fully informed, because you never know what you don't know. And almost 60% are saying, I have only partial information and it's possibly not enough. So they perceive a lack of information. They are uncertain whether the information they have is complete and correct. And based on that, they need to take decisions. I think everybody from us knows from own business practice that is not a good rate of being informed. Now, the result you see on the right side is then already our producer organizations for EU organic regulation, and only a quarter are saying they are fully ready. Well, if 36 are well informed and some have challenges, then the full readiness is possibly a bit lower. But you would also expect that those that have challenges and have only partial information are only partially ready. So that's a bit higher, 63%. And some are clearly saying that they are not ready. Again, we are in the period of auditing happening, being scheduled, and this is far from being sufficient when it comes to availability of information and producer readiness. Next slide. And when we talk about main challenge, or the one top challenge, because that's the question for the producer organization that you face, 40% are saying, I do not have enough financial resources to comply with all the requirements. And we have heard already from Florentine what those financial resources need to be spent for. It can be the bill to the certification body. It can be the investment into the ICS. It can be the investment into finding new structures. It can be a lot of different other things. That is the main challenge that people are having. And that has also to do with the economic weakness of producer organizations in the agricultural sector. It's not that they have big financial buffer that they can invest whenever the EU decides to have an additional regulation that goes into the reality of producer organizations. The second big challenge is the non-compliance with the farm size of members. And with farm size, we mean farm size and organic turnover, and we have been just discussing that. I want to make very clear and give you also an example why this is an increased figure. We have seen a result which was lower even a month ago, but I would say that this becomes even more a challenge in the next month, and simply illustrate that with you later with figures about coffee and cocoa. There are a couple of other challenges, 10% for ICS, 10% for legal setup, which is quite severe in certain countries that you can't overcome in the required time, the legal challenges. But I want to point out also the last one. Yeah, 8% are saying the total number of members is the major challenge I have. Now, 8% may not sound a lot, but 8% is, in this case, possibly 50% of the farmer families, because those are the big cooperatives. And if they don't find a solution, it's not only a problem for all the farmer families, it's also a challenge for the product supply being available on the market. So sometimes, 8, a low figure, sounds not important. In this case, it is super important because 8% is actually 50% of the supply. Next slide, please. Example coffee, roughly 100 of producer organizations. Of those 272 are coffee organizations. The figures that you will see here for coffee and then cocoa and banana are roughly all the same, so I will not go through the figures. It's all confirming the big picture that I've already drawn. But I want to make sure that you understand the importance of financial resources in coffee, because coffee organizations are relatively small. If you have an increase of the certification costs and any adaptation costs by 100% or 200 or 300%, then you understand why possibly 42% is actually quite a challenge for many of them. Next slide on cocoa. The sample size is much smaller. Here we are talking about organic cocoa mainly out of Latin America, but only 1 or 2 countries from West Africa that joined that. The numbers are quite the same, but if you read on the right side, the second challenge, it's the non-compliance with the farm size, means farm size and organic turnover. You need to keep in mind that when the EU was setting the 25,000 organic turnover per individual member of a cooperative as the threshold, the price of cocoa at that point in time for an organic farmer was possibly around 1,500 to 2,000 euros per ton of organic cocoa. The world prices are always in market terms, FOB, so that's different. It's not what the family is getting and the member is getting. That was maybe at that time $3,000 per ton, but the farm member may have gotten 1,500 to 2,000 per metric ton of cocoa. That means that if you sell 12 tons of cocoa, then you're still okay during the year with your organic turnover, and you're still compliant with the regulation within group certification. But now the world market price is, since 18 months, fluctuating between 5,000 and 12,000. So that means a triple of the market price. Most producer organizations have managed to give the majority of that price increase also to their members, simply because of the reason that if they don't pay the individual members a highly increased price, then the members would sell part of the cocoa on the road to intermediary traders. So it's a question of economic survival of the cooperative to get the cocoa from the members. And for that, they need to put a lot of money on the table. That means now that a member who sells 12 tons of cocoa, which was my example, will now immediately earn not $25,000 per year, but maybe 50 or even 70,000. And that means that throws the person out of the organization. Now, I said already, the price is fluctuating. What we don't want, and that could be one of the simplification proposals to the EU, is that every year the producer organizations need either to exit and people from a membership, or that individuals need to apply individually, and next year the price goes down and then you cannot afford organic certification. We need a criteria that is much more stable, and we need something that is. Otherwise, we will be seeing many more non-compliances of farm size and organic turnover in. Next slide on banana, and then I'm almost done. So for banana, it's roughly the same, but here you see even more. People are saying financial resources to comply is my biggest single challenge. And that has to do with the fact that in banana supply chains, you don't have world market prices that go up that highly. There is almost no margin in banana supply chains. We as consumers are benefiting from ridiculously low banana prices. And that's why small producers in banana that are competing with big plantations on the world market, by no surprise, are saying financial resources are our biggest challenge. Next slide, please. So when we're asking producers what kind of technical support would you like to receive, what makes you more ready to comply with the EU regulation, then on the right side you see 39% are saying, general information, webinars, newsletters, trainings. Many organizations are doing something, but when you go to the EU website, you even don't find a consolidated regulation. Many training manuals, and maybe it's even too much. The complexity is too big for people to digest, and therefore they still say, where is this simple to understand, easy to implement information so that we are sure what to do. 30% want very particular technical assistance on the internal control system. I know that, for example, Naturland has done many trainings, also FiBL has done many trainings, and still not everybody is fully informed. Some are not adhering to an organization or association like Naturland, and not everybody has access to all these webinars that certain organizations are providing. It would be just nice that this was much more widespread and much more targeted. And then 22% are saying they want technical assistance on the legal setup. this you can mirror with the previous slides, that many producer organizations are challenged with a group of operator concept and how it translates in their jurisdiction into a feasible legal organization and setup that is possible and the best and fit for the future. And with that, I turn to the last slide, I think. So our conclusions from a producer perspective is threefold in order to enhance the preparedness for producers for upcoming audits. The first is producers need more time. There is likely that many producer organizations already have or will face major non-compliances simply because they are not ready. It's too short. Then once you have your non-compliances, that you demonstrate corrective measures in order to meet the deadlines for having a certificate that is then valid as of 15th of October latest, because it might be that you need to show that compliance much earlier. And that is because the marketplace wants to be reassured so that when setting up trade contracts, that the organic certificate is valid. And in some commodities, trade contracts are done in October, November, so that might fit perfectly. But in other commodities, trade contracts are set much earlier. So what do you do once you are decertified or you don't get a trade contract? It might be that you need to reapply for certification, and then the whole land conversion question comes in, and that could be longer term supply chain disruptions. But we need to make sure that during that more time that we do certain things, and that is to have better information to producers. I don't go into the details, we had that slide before. We need more targeted and affordable technical support to producer organizations. And as another measure, we need to have some changes in the EU regulation, and I'm very happy to go into that maybe as a discussion point. But one of the points I mentioned already is the organic turnover point. There are a couple of others that we find quite critical that we do during the buy-in of more time, and we are very happy to coordinate all our efforts with the EU to lobby for more time for producers so that supply chains are not getting disrupted in the next coming month. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andreas. And actually, we have some extra time even, so you were very fast. I would like to take the extra time that we have for a clarifying question. There are many technical questions that I think we will leave for later, but this link between farmers that are certified fair trade and organic, do you see a trend of them saying, well, maybe we leave the EU organic and we stay only USDA organic and stay with fair trade and start to find new markets because this is such a burden and actually economically doesn't make sense? And do you see a strong role from the importers, from the consumers, from the customers of those smallholders? Are they supporting them? Do you see them engaged of the risk of their value change and how it will take? And always know the connection between fair trade and organic, because it's a double effort for these smallholder groups.
Yeah, correct. And unfortunately, when we designed that survey, we didn't include that question. So therefore, on one of the slides, I cannot give more details why it's 20% of the producers not undertaking any efforts to renew organic regulation. But we know anecdotal evidence that quite some producers are saying, I've renewed or I am renewing my NOP certificate, or I will change to export markets to the Far East. And that's actually quite concerning, but it might be a wise business decision because the rules are a bit different and don't put producers especially under the threat of restructuring with their membership. In terms of European traders, brands, and I would expand that to industry associations, we are not seeing coordinated efforts. We are seeing single efforts. I've been also listening at BioFach at a number of presentations where people are saying, I work with my supply chains, with my suppliers, etc. So I can only imagine that the same supplier might get 3 times some support, which is not coordinated, and many producers are left out because that support is not reached to them. I also think that many traders simply don't see what is coming to them. Otherwise, they would be taking much more effective and urgent measures. So there is also an information gap for that regulation with the organic sector at large. And that's not really surprising because the same is, for example, true for the EU deforestation regulation. You talk to cocoa and coffee traders, which are heavily impacted by the regulation, and simply some of them don't know that the regulation is coming to them. So there's a systemic question of how does a economic sector, and this would be now the organic sector, how do you get the consistent information in due time so that you can take in due course coordinated action is something that we need as a sector need to think about. But at the moment, that is not in place.
Thank you, Andreas. I think it will be, as you say, a huge reality check for the industry when they see that a value chain is a whole and you can take it pieces by pieces, and it will, once the impact is in place. Thank you. I would like now to invite Federica, that I see you already opened your camera. Thank you for that. And the floor is all yours. One thing for our audience, I'm collecting questions, so please keep on bringing them also on our YouTube live stream. And now when Federica finishes, we will open the Q&A for all the panelists. So thank you, Federica. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and see so many people online as well. So on my side, yeah, I'm responsible for supporting our members in the Philippines to get ready for Naturland certification. So I can share a bit of Naturland experience, what we are facing in our day-to-day working with several group of operators with ICS. Yeah, and the next, please. Actually, Naturland has been working on the topic of internal control system for a very long time. So since actually year 2000, we published together with IMO the first guidelines for producer groups with the internal control system. And we have kept working on these topics. So Naturland is a certifier. We have private standard, organic standards. There's additional requirements to the EU organic, like social standards or agronomic standards, requirements like growing coffee under agroforestry. And we also had, we have also additional requirements for internal control system. So on that side, we expect that our members are ready to comply with all the additional requirements that have been included now in the regulation for what concerns also documented procedures and the structure of the ICS, for example, in terms of staff composition, that have also been included in the new regulation. But as was mentioned before, now we are, and most of our members are mostly busy with complying and getting ready to comply with the new definition of group of operators. And just to give you some figures on Naturland, we haven't done any overall survey of our members at the moment. But I can tell you that we have approximately 300 members outside Europe, which comprise approximately 120,000 farmers, producers. And out of these 300 members, approximately 60% are producer groups with the internal control system. 30% are in India, so approximately 65 groups are in India. So I think our figures are in line with what was presented by the previous speakers, that approximately 70 to 80% of our producer groups with the internal control system need now to adapt to the new requirements for group of operators of the EU regulation. Next, please. So, and also some, I wanted to share a few challenges that we have been observing from the different regions where we are working. Again, these findings are quite in line with what was presented by Florentine and Andreas. In Africa, we have approximately 30 operators. They are producing cocoa, coffee, vanilla, spices, sesame, and chia seeds. And again, for our members in Africa, one of the biggest challenges, or anyway, the challenge where we are mostly focusing at the moment, it's the meeting the requirements of a definition of what is a group of operators, and then in Africa, they have the issues that most of the groups, they are very large, some even up to 10,000 members. So now they have to split in several legal entities, which of course then implies more costs for them. And they are also facing challenges with the local country-specific law on the registration of these legal entities. So, for example, some of our members, they had to actually create more legal entities compared to what would be required by the EU regulation, again impacting on the final cost of the certification and also of the management of these groups. So this is for the registration challenges, and of course also the exclusion of the non-organic groups. Non-organic members from the group is an issue which is resolved more or less in a creative way, but that's of course is posing challenges. And as it also was mentioned, who is gonna share the burden of the increased costs pose quite some uncertainty for them. In Asia, we mostly see our members organized as exporters, producers organized group. So most of our members in Asia, they also are undergoing restructuring. So creating a farmer association with the legal entities separated for the processor or the exporter. And then this association gives the mandate, the export and the processor, to manage the ICS for them, so that the management of the ICS actually remains the same as it has been in the last years. But creating this new farmer association that, I mean, we will see with the time, but at the moment are quite, they look quite some like empty boxes because they are mostly created with the support of the processors. And it will be, we will see how and if this new farmer association will also strengthen the producers that are taking part of this farmer association. So for example, if you look with my experience on working on coconut in the Philippines, when there had been issues with the land holding size, since several coconut producers have very large fields, and in those cases, mostly the land holding is separated across family members to reduce the land holding size, and of course that's also one could question afterwards if the quality assurance then of the ICS will actually benefit from this type of bit artificial division of the land holding size. We hope, though, that since now the list of the members of each group will be published in the certificates, that will make actually easier for us to monitor if farmers are registered in multiple groups for the same products, which is actually not allowed Next, please. Yeah, concerning to Latin America, we have actually approximately 48 operators there. And yeah, the operators and the members that we have in these countries, they tend to have a very strong organization with a long history of implementation and strong relationship with their members. And of course, for them, the need to restructure due to external requirements it's been felt as a very as a big challenging. There are strong resistance towards that type of restructuring, and also they are facing issues with members that are too big, so they will probably need to get they will need to be excluded by the ICS and get single certification. And also with the many of these cooperatives, they are members, they are non-organic, and so also they need to be excluded from the group. We are also have operators in Turkey, approximately 8. Most of them, they work with the system of producer groups where the certificates is under the processor and they are 100% individually inspected. And they also will need now to restructure, since this type of certification is not valid anymore. They will need, most of them, they will probably become singly certified, increase the cost. Some are also considering to restructure into ICS, though this is a quite also a cultural shift, because they are used to work as independent entrepreneurs, and the setup of an internal control system is quite foreign to their way of working. Next, please. So in general, in our day-to-day operation, we have been already seeing our members facing a strong cost of certification increases, 50%, sometimes even more, mostly due to the need of creating these new legal entities. And when several new legal entities needs to be created, this is also an impact on the other certification that our members have, like Naturland or some other voluntary certification, because that implies also more management on the certified side. Yeah, so it's a cost that increase not only for EU organic, but as implication then also for the other certification, increasing even more the financial burden on these operators. And as it was said before, we can see already that the one that will be impacted the most are the small organizations that actually are the one that we would like to have more also in our membership, and we would like to promote the most. But the reality is that they will be the most impacted by this financial burden. We see still a lot of uncertainties, though some of our members have started to get ready already by, let's say, the last quarter or last year. Actually, we are seeing still now many members still thinking and planning on how to adjust their legal entities and their structure. So, and as I said, now we are focusing mostly on this definition of group of operators, and we are not even like really thinking of what will be the implication then of the additional sampling rate the CBs have to do, and then what will happen with the findings actually that would be start to come up this year. So in general, therefore, we also expect an increase of fraud and weak management, because all our efforts are so much focused on this adaptation and readiness to the EU organic, and I have the feeling that less effort and less attention is put into having strong ICS in place. So in general, increasing workload also on the certifier side for managing all this restructuring and especially connected to the new legal entity. But the positive things also that came up from the previous speakers and that we see especially in the coming years, once the changes are settled in, an increase of transparency and of the integrity. So that's an opportunity, I think, for us, for the operators, and for the whole sector in general. Next, please. And now I would like to show you quickly some example on how we are supporting our members. And not only to get ready, so we have a team actually of 15 staff working on 20 countries with also additional freelancers, and we offer this type of tailor-made support that Andreas also mentioned before me. Next, please. And in addition to that, what we have been just published recently is an updated version of our manual for a smallholder organization with internal control system. And this manual is meant to be used by new groups that want to start to implement an internal control system, or also groups that already have an internal control system in place and need also to adapt to the new organic regulation. The guidelines are available in 3 different languages: English, Spanish, and French. Next, please. And you will see, you find a lot of hands-on materials on how and information on how the group can adapt to the new organic regulation with specific references to the regulation. Thanks also to the great job that was done by IFOAM and FiBL on collecting and compiling all the information on the new organic regulation. And though the guidelines are also directed to operators that want to be certified by Naturland, so there are some specific Naturland requirements that are highlighted throughout the guidelines. You will find general information on how where the specific requirements of the EU regulation are to be found, and you find also some templates that you can use. You can request, for example, a Word version of those documents if you think that could be useful for your group. So, for example, you have a template for an internal checklist of your members. And also you have a template for internal checklist of the purchasing center. And as last things I wanted to share with you is there are additional training resources on internal control system, and not only, that can be found on the Naturland Academy website. This could be useful for your group of operators, for example, for conducting the yearly training that needs to be done for your internal inspectors, but also for all your members that needs to be regularly trained on organic farming. You find training materials that can be used and freely accessed. So that, we also remember that we should not only focus on the definition group of operators, but also on having strong and well-working ICS. Thanks a lot. That was it from my
Thank
side.
you, Federica. I'm back, but please don't run before we open the floor. I wanted to clarify, because you have the academy that I see that you're starting to already implement on this, that we work together also with IFOAM Organics International with our academy. But you really brought the different realities and challenges each region has. And it's completely different if you think of what they will need in Latin America or what they need in Asia. So you are adapting also the materials and the trainings for those needs based on what you got from the results, or you're creating a huge package and then each region will tailor and adapt it?
Yeah, well, the guidelines, so the manual that you find which is accessible to everyone on our website. That's only translated in different languages. So yeah, that's as much as adaptation we needed. We did actually in those regards. Of course, then when we offer support to our members, but that's tendentially specific only to our members, then of course it's adapted to the context where we are, because we can rely on freelancer there in the countries, yeah, as well.
Okay, thank you. I want to, invite all the speakers to open their cameras. Thank you again. We received a lot of information and we have tons of questions. So let's warm up the flow. We have some time still. And wait that I have, there. Find my way in the computer, because this of two screens sometimes is challenging. So for example, there is an interesting question for Andreas, particularly from Sigrid. Are there any measures on the part of the fair trade requirements set as to absorb the growers that will no longer be EU certified organic, or they have to continue to work sustainably? So to make sure that even if they are not longer organic certified, they still keep the practices, and that this doesn't disappear due to market restrictions or certification restrictions, but that practices are preserved. I think it's really the core of the issue. It's not only about certification, it's about the actual practices and how we ensure those good practices still stay.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It really goes to my heart, because I was also introduced as having had an organic career, and that's still in my heart very much. I must say, first of all, what we try to make sure in fair trade is that because of the changes of a producer organizations in terms of structure and membership and what have you, that organization does not have any challenges with a fair trade certification. And that's not trivial, because we have standards, and if a group decides to do certain things, they still need to comply with our standards. We have looked at possible changes, we have looked at our standards, and I think we can be quite confident that there is no challenge to maintain the fair trade certification. Now, having said that, it is also true that the fair trade certification is not an ecological certification. We have environmental requirements, and we would hope that the sustainable agricultural practices are then maintained by that to a sufficient level. But the question is that good enough? Because where is the market reward to maintain those environmental practices that would go beyond the fair trade standards, which are not organic standards? And you all know that the EU has basically said, whenever you want to have any claims that are close to the word of organic, natural, and what have you, then you must be certified against the EU regulation. So the fair trade certification does not give an incentive, because there is no marketplace for any other type of sustainable practices that you can then claim for. Therefore, I fear that either producer organizations give up on organic and therefore do not practice sustainable agriculture anymore, or will go to non-certified schemes like, the regenerative agriculture or agroecology systems, or simply will maintain their sustainable practices via exporting to NOP or China, what have you. But it's really heartbreaking for me that I need to count with there will be thousands of hectares that have been converted into organic that will be reconverted into non-organic practice.
Thank you, Andreas. And Florentine, I think you want to add on that. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that in case of the Dominican Republic, this was exactly something that all national stakeholders really brought up, and were in some cases a national solution, but sort of maybe suitable to find a reasonable vehicle or I don't know, collection program for these type of farmers, because this was really a widely shared challenge where maybe national governments to some extent can step in to support and collect those farms that fall out of the organic EU certification system, to find adapted solution for them to continue organic practices.
I think, Andreas, you wanted to sum up, and maybe I add an extra ingredient to this question, that is this the option of a different market. You brought it in your presentation as well. The Asian market is growing. North America is also growing. So also maybe reducing the sexiness of the European market, it becomes less attractive for them. So how it, maybe we don't lose them as organic, but Europe lose them.
Yeah, correct. And we are seeing that obviously in many more legislations that are out there with the Green Deal of the EU, that we will possibly even face non-tariff barrier complaints from other economic actors against all these regulations. And we don't know what will all become out of this. But Europe becomes definitely a less targeted market for many actors. Not only organic agricultural practices will be more targeted to other economic areas in the world. Whether the markets are in the same way attractive is a different way, but I don't want to talk about over-regulation, but I want to talk about an undesired impact on the complexity for a producer in third countries, which is far too much because there are many more regulations to cover at the same point. But there is another question in the chat that is linked to that, and that is the question, are markets and consumers rewarding all these costs? So, you could easily argue, oh, this is all complex, but if the prices go up by 100%, then I'm fine to get into renewal of the organic certification. Well, honestly, nobody knows. At the moment, the market signs are not very positive. At the moment, if I was a producer, I would not get clear signals of go on with all your efforts because the market will reward that for certain. On the other side, I would just want to say, I've said in my presentation, the cocoa prices have been tripling on the world market, and that was because of a perceived and real supply shortage. So things can happen currently on the market that nobody has thought about even 2 years ago or 20 years ago. So if organic produce becomes scarce, it might be that the market prices are going high up, but we don't know that yet. We don't know when, to which extent, whether across all products, across all geographies, and for a single producer with your supply chain partner that you have been loyal to in the last 10 or 20 years. That we don't know. But we know that the consumer is rather under pressure, so there is a limit to consumer prices definitely.
Please go ahead, yeah.
And what we heard also in a lot of interviews is exactly that producers are not yet sure whether their investment in the extra certification will pay off, because even if the prices are higher, they also get better prices for the conventional product. So that doesn't increase the incentive to invest triple the amount of money into the organic certification, because you still need to be, you need a good organic premium to cover those higher compliance costs. And that doesn't even yet mean that the farmer is rewarded more for being an organic farmer, which is at the heart of the program. But yes, so clearly this is also a case where that's why we try to create more awareness of the challenges, because ultimately the market will have to pay these higher costs if somebody is meant to continue organic certification. The idea was clearly that the market would cover the higher compliance cost for a stronger control system, and hopefully we get to that point for those good groups that do a good job.
But following on that question would be, are the consumers at the market willing to pay that extra for that guarantee that is supposed to bring? And when I'm talking about the market, is the final consumer as well, where we are struggling with an economic crisis all around the world, inflation rates. So also organic markets, even if they're still growing, is still a challenge. And now you're putting an extra ingredient in the mix. So there is analysis, there are discussions on how this will impact the market as a whole. I see Federica maybe also wants to pitch in.
Well, I think as Andreas said, we don't know yet, how that will impact the final price. But as we saw already, a crunch in organic consumption from consumers due to the actual inflations, especially in Germany with the economic crisis. I think there is not so much that can be added, at the final price to the consumers without then reducing substantially. the consumption. So I think, yeah, traders have to have bigger share of that. That's also what we're trying to discuss with them when with our close relationship that we have with them. And yeah, so that's what we're hoping.
And I have another question for you specifically, is on the status now of Naturland International on the ISO 17065 accredited. If it's still Sigrid is coming with her technical questions, if Naturland is accredited or not.
Yes, we are accredited.
Okay,
yes.
wonderful. And I would like to go back a bit on this, on the turnovers. I think there is still a lot of questions because it's not only about how we define turnover, but also on multi-croppings, also wild collection, how it takes place. There counts is turnover or the hectares, because I think we had been talking all about agricultural land, but many of spices, a lot of cash crops come from wild collection areas and are also managed by a group of farmers or harvesters. So how that plays also the role. And then on the 25%, there were also questions regarding the 25,000, sorry, questions regarding if there's a distinction of where that money goes, you know, if it's, because maybe, yes, you have a turnover on organic of over 25,000, but only 5,000 is for Europe and the rest is NOP or Asia. Do you make that distinction in Europe? Is 25,000 for the European or as a whole?
Okay. So wild collection, question one. Wild collection, wild harvest is dealt with in a completely different section of the regulation. So the group of operators is for farmers who do agriculture as per definition of the regulation. So wild harvest in a forest or wild area is dealt with the same article as it was in, or a very similar article as it was before, is a completely separate section, and the group of operator rules don't apply. Now, we all know, and I think also in the IFOAM guidance, we pointed out that there is a few hybrid cases. I mean, obviously, if the collectors also have their own plot of land where they grow the wild crop that they sell to the group, this is agriculture and falls under the group of operator rules. So it's all about the distinction between wild harvest and agriculture. As soon as it's agriculture, it goes under the rules for certification of a farmer. If it's wild collection, it's wild collection, but the wild collection rules themselves have not changed significantly. So for typical wild harvest crops, there's a separate section in Annex 2 of the regulation that applies. The second question was about the turnover. So as it is defined, I don't think any CB would say that organic sales to other markets don't count, because I mean, it's sales to the group, and at the level of a single member selling to the group, you don't know yet in which markets it will end up. But if it's bought as organic by the group, it clearly counts for the organic turnover. What doesn't count is if the farmer sells a bag of cocoa to a local village trader as conventional cocoa, because it's not organic sales, and only those sales through the group, per definition, through the joint marketing system, are certified organic and can make any organic claims. So all sales to the group do count for the organic turnover. But just to stress this again, this is only relevant if the farmer has more than 5 hectares of land. If it's less than 5 hectares, you don't even have to look at the turnover. And in terms of multiple crops, I understand the question, but we actually haven't seen as many cases. I mean, apart from spices, not all, although most organic farmers grow multiple crops, not all are covered by the SCS, covered under the organic certification and bought by the group as organic. So obviously, again, the organic turnover of a spice farmer, if they sell pepper and nutmeg and cinnamon to the group, yes, you need to add the product sales of these different products for the entire year delivered by the farmer. But again, I haven't actually seen cases that this exceeds. Where we have seen cases is fresh fruit in Latin America. If they have a lot of specialty fruits growing on the farm in fruits in Latin America, it's anyway very easy to exceed the 25,000 euro threshold because the production costs are quite high. So in banana, whenever there is a farm with more than 5 hectares, it's automatically far beyond 25,000 euro organic turnover in banana, because 95 or up to 90% of the costs are external production costs, and only 10% is the actual margin for the farmer. So some products face particularly big challenges there. And what's really tricky with the new effect in cocoa and coffee is that the prices are so fluctuating. For the last 10 years, none of these cocoa and coffee farmers would have come even anywhere close to 25,000 euro threshold. So this doesn't make a convincing business case to go for individual certification in the long run, because you really don't know whether next year you can afford 1,500 euro plus running your own documentation to be certified organic. Plus, there is the extra challenge of having to exit the organization because the group of operator cannot have any member that is too large. So you can't sell to that organization anymore unless they're also certified as operator. So this is really increasing a level of complexity and a level of costs that often exceed 10% of the organic turnover because of that artificial threshold of the 25,000 euro. Like, yes, they make more turnover, say, with cocoa, and they could exceed 25,000 euro, but it could still easily mean that the real certification costs they will have will be more than 10% of their organic turnover. And take this case in Europe, nobody would go for individual certification without subsidies if it is 10% of your organic turnover is paid for certification. I mean, just think about this business case. Who would go for that?
Exactly. And I think that's a key point that we keep on forgetting. All developers of standards keep on forgetting the reality at the end. Yeah, and bringing on that, because part, as you said, the turnover is one part, but then the size of the farm, the group is a big issue, and there's a lot of adaptation that will be needed there. So we have two very interesting questions, one from Nick Gallo and another one from Veronica. And Nick is bringing the scenario of unions of cooperatives and how that works. And I think there in Naturland also, Federica will have a lot of experience on that. So how that will be impacted with the changes on the new regulation. And I will read directly what Veronica wrote. She says that in some organizations, if members do not meet the size requirement, they must certify it individually. That is what you just brought, how to make a case out of that. So to avoid affecting the Fairtrade certification, they should not leave the organization. So how it's not clear for them whether to maintain the organic certification, the members need to meet their size requirement or need to go out of the group, certify themselves individually, and well, so technical questions. I open the floor. I think maybe Andreas or Florentino, but whoever wants is brave enough to start. Too shy. Andreas, I see that you want to go ahead. Or Florentino, go ahead.
Federica, you want to answer? I mean, I can start with the unions of cooperative. These are many of the big farmers associations are second or third grade organizations, especially in Africa, but also in Latin America, and indeed is particularly complex for them to meet because many have non-organic members in the primary organizations, and also the way the regulation is worded that the group of operator must be composed of farmers as members. This in a literal sense doesn't apply to second grade organizations unless the case is different by national law. So unions are particularly complex and usually don't meet the group of operator definition for multiple reasons. So they need to adapt anyway. It's not just one problem, but often many problems. if they have just single members that are too large suddenly, we have seen different adaptation measures. One is, as Federica also mentioned, that if it's single members and say there are 7 hectares, they could consider to split operations. So the farm splits between family members to be under 5 hectares and be safe. This is something that is happening in many countries as an adaptation measure. So you have a higher number of farmers because farms split to be under the 5 hectare rules. The farms, generally the recommendation is not to exclude our recommendation has been not to exclude non-organic or too large members, but rather keep like the union certified as an operator and certify the primary organizations as the group of operator, because then the union as an exporter can buy from individually certified producers, they can buy from the group of operators, they could even buy from other groups, and they could export. So it works. Yeah. But it is tricky, and sometimes the groups can set up a new legal entity, which we have also seen some groups setting up, like an artificial new entity just composed of the small eligible farmers, so that again the currently certified group is certified only as processor and exporter, so the market doesn't notice anything, but there is new legal entities that set up specifically to meet the EU regulation. And this is more helpful, especially if there is a large number of non-organic or too large farmers, and then only say part of the members are certified organic eligible farmers, then this is about the only option that really works, because you can't, you don't want to ruin the existing big organization by the adaptation.
Thank you, Florentine. We still have 4 minutes left. I have one closing question for closing the session, but I don't know if Andreas or Federica want to add something on this. So maybe I go to the final question that is from 2 of our experts. One is from Gabi and another one is from Emmanuel. Emmanuel brings PGS as an alternative and how it plays and how it played the discussion within the European Union that is not recognized, but is something that is growing all around the world and is an internal control system in a different way. But actually, I love the question from Gabi that is, will this work? Will this bring more traceability, transparency, assurance, and all this burden? Do you see that in the long run, this makes sense? Chan, sorry for the very honest question. So the floor is yours. I don't know, Federica, you have a lot of experience on PGS and all around the world, how it's growing, especially in the Philippines. So maybe you can bring a bit of that experience.
Well, maybe we go a little bit more too far away from the topic. I think better to stick to internal control system.
No, but I mean not a PGS itself, but the internal control system of a PGS. There you have a lot of item things, tools that have they been thought, adapted, think of, okay, how we can, from what is already there existing. No?
Yeah, I mean, but we're talking systems that are meant for, I think, for different purpose. I think the strength of PGS, when it's well done, is locally adapted. You have participation of many stakeholders at the local level. Consumers are close by. In the best case scenario, they're also involved. So we are talking of a different level of sharing knowledge, and you don't have this long and long value chain where I think I know some countries they even allow PGS for exports in Brazil or Chile, but I mean, the reality, I think it's a system that is better suitable for the locally. And regarding traceability, I think there are good opportunity for that. We see already, just like for us, for our day-to-day operation, I must say, makes it easier and more linear to understand better how is the value chain is structured when we have a separate group of producers and the operator, especially in Asia when you have this contract production. It's many cases not so clear, and I think for that it will bring, once things have settled down, better transparency. Yeah.
Andreas, Florentine, on transparency, on
Yeah,
traceability, no? Also, it was a lot about
very
it.
quickly, participatory systems are more for local markets. It's a regulated market, so it is an opportunity. If one can develop those markets, then PGS has a good future, but it's only complementary to those effects, to those systems that are suited for export, and I don't see in the next 10 years a big change on the regulatory market for that. On the question on traceability and transparency, I'm afraid that that is not the intention of the EU. The intention of the EU is to protect the EU consumer, and therefore we should not measure the outcomes of that regulation against any other objective. Now, you can say it should have other objectives, but that was not the intention. And my biggest fear is that people at the moment even don't see the post-certification challenges of the EU, which have all to do with the residue testing procedures and potentially the thresholds. So any small producer organization that has 2 or 3 containers being blocked in Rotterdam and being downgraded will be immediately bankrupt because they need to bear all the burden. And that is at the moment at nobody's really forefront of the thoughts, but there will be a lot of disaster happening after implementation of the EU regulation, even if we gained your certificate. In order to prevent that, I just want to say, together with IFAM, we will be coordinating our lobby efforts in Brussels, and I hope that the head of the organic unit and the EU Commissioner for Agriculture, we have a chance to soften the regulation. It has some good intentions, and I think even some good measures, but I think some of them are actually counterproductive. And we would hope that with all the support of the organic sector, we will have some success, but that needs to come in the next few months.
Thank you, Andreas. Florentine?
Yes. I mean, in terms of implementation and training, there is a huge advantage of having the same set of rules. I mean, that's something where, for in international organic certification, the practices have varied too widely, and there hasn't been, clearly applied standards. So even for training and support purposes, it's kind of really useful to have one clearly spelled out legal basis. That said, right now and in this year and next year, I think we all need to have a lot of patience because it feels quite bumpy and a lot of aspects are still fairly unclear in practice. And I hope that for some of the particularly rocky or tricky issues, there will be some slightly softer pragmatic solutions so that in favor of the actual objectives of reaching the transparency and the good solution, like these smaller adaptations like we have just been discussing, for example, about turnover, where it's really just about some small adjustments to apply in practice something that was designed quite a couple of years ago and that is now being implemented also slower and later than originally it was envisaged, in terms of the transition period for producer groups having maybe 1 or 2 audits before they are meant to be compliant, which they haven't had. So I hope we find some solutions to bring all the good groups now across the threshold, and a bit of patience from everyone while it's bumpy. Yeah, so fingers crossed it will work out, is my
Well, I want to thank you all. It's already 2 hours gone, and I think there were a lot of questions I didn't manage to raise. So I encourage all the audience to please reach out to the speakers, to reach out today. The team at the office here will be processing all the recordings, so everything is available tomorrow for you. So, but please, this discussion will still need to keep on going. I want to thank you, the 3 of you, for all the information, for all the case studies, from bringing all this work for smallholders. We can see the spirit behind. It's not only to protect the European consumers is also to protect a lot of livelihoods behind those products, no? So thank you again for joining us, for sharing all your knowledge, all your experience, and thank you for the over 500 people we had today and all the questions that we had. Unfortunately, I think we needed 2 more hours for only questions and answers, but that will come in the next one. Thank you again. I don't know if you want to give a final remark or a final goodbye. I open the floor. If not,
Thank you.
bye-bye, everybody. Thank you all. And please join IFOAM, share the movement, and let's keep building an organic future for all. Bye-bye.